Welcome everyone, I'm Tom Coots and this is Billy Boyle, and we're happy to bring to you the second segment of Charlestown's oral history that is brought to you by the Charlestown Historical Society. As many of you know, Billy's my partner in crime. We've done a lot of projects together and we're excited to be doing this oral history project. This was a dream of Jim Conway and Peter Looney and a number of others years ago, and we want to keep that dream alive. One of the great things about Charlestown is they have a tradition of the oral history being passed down one generation to the next generation. And the fear is that at one time the next generation will not continue to record it. So we're hoping to do that today. For those of you who saw our first segment, Billy spoke with Ed Kelly about the 1940s and what life was like here in Charlestown during World War II. So Billy, why don't you recap a little bit about that, and then we'll go on to the 1950s.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it was. I thought Eddie did a great job. He got deep into the war and the people in the town, how it affected the families mostly. Everybody volunteered. They even lied getting into the service. They said they were 18, they were 17. So most of the men went off to war, and then we get into Eddie. Things changed when they come back, and we get into the urban renewal is going to start with the new project, the bridges being built, buildings being torn down, people being relocated. So it did have the urban renewal had a big effect on West End more than us, but it did affect Charlestown because from, I would say, halfway up Bunker Hill Street down to the waterfront, to the Navy Yard, was all four-deckers, wood, in the 1930s.
So now the West End, if you look at the West End today versus the West End of the 1940s, there's nothing that resembles the way it was.
No.
But Charlestown changed dramatically, but a lot of its foundation still remained. They tore down a lot of the triple, quadruple decker houses.
Yep.
Now, before urban renewal came in and all of that, you lived in a cold water flat.
Yeah, I was one of the ones that had to move. I didn't have to because my house is still there. I was born on Decatur Street. But we heard about urban renewal, we moved to Park Street. I lived at 22 Park, right across from the old Big Potato, which is now the Ironside Grill. And that house is still standing today. But when the new bridge come in, 93 entrance and 93 exit, it was right at the end of Park Street, across from my windows. And my mother and people down thought there's no place for kids to be playing with 93 entrance and exit right there. So we got upgraded.
So for those of you watching who weren't born in the 40s and don't really know what a cold water flat is like, and those of you who have had the luxury of being able to turn your heat or air conditioning on, tell us a little bit about life in a cold water flat in Charlestown.
It was tough, I'd say, but we accepted it. There was just cold water. I lived at 22 Park. It was a four-room apartment. My mother and my sister and myself. Was a single mother, married but separated. But we were there, and you had no heat unless you got 5-gallon jugs of carrot oil.
And then what would you do with the oil?
We had to tip it upside down and put it in a big burner with the 4 plates on it, and they had the little coils around, and we'd light them. So on a Saturday night, you have a bath once a week. We had no toilet, no tub. We had a soapstone sinks, one beside each other in the kitchen, and you put your rear end in one and your feet in the other, and that's where you took your bath. The bathroom was a toilet only with a pull chain.
So your house was heated just by the kitchen stove?
Well, we had a potbelly stove in the parlor, the same idea, oil.
Okay.
So we had to put signs in the window, like Eddie Kelly said. We put a sign if you need oil, and the truck said stop. If you wanted ice for your refrigerator, because we didn't have freezers, you get a big chunk of ice and they carry it up and throw it in the refrigerator. But then, like I said, it was a plus for us when urban renewal started coming in, and we wanted to relocate because now we got upgraded. We moved to the project. My gosh almighty. We had a tub, we had a shower, we had painted wall, we had 5 rooms. I said it was like going from the slums to the, but actually Park Street was nice. The families were fantastic. All the old families down there, we grew up together. But a lot of us moved to the project. which a lot of people did coming back, like Eddie Kelly said, from the Second World War. All the veterans moved in, which was perfect timing for them.
So what did urban renewal accomplish, or what was the goal of the urban renewal?
I think the whole thing started because they wanted the overpass 93 going through the city of Boston, and we were sort of in the way. The West End, like I said, they really got rooked a little because they were supposed to be relocated, and a lot of them still to this day are mad they never got relocated.
Right.
But most of the people in Charlestown, I know one of the people wrote into us or called us, Tom, after the last episode, and they said, Billy, we didn't get a real total of the population in Charlestown in the 40s and 50s, but it had to be a lot more than now. So I did a little check-in, and the person was right. Charlestown at the time was almost up to 40,000 people.
Really?
We have 4 deckers, all under that Tobin Bridge, double sides, 4 families to 1 building.
Now to bring that into some sort of a perspective, Charlestown's 1 square mile. We all know about the 1 square mile. I live in Revere.
Yep.
Revere is 10 square miles. We have a population of 52,000.
Yeah.
So that's 10 miles, 52,000. You had 1 square mile
Almost 40,000
with
people.
40,000 people.
Jammed in.
They must have been stacked on top
They
of each other.
were. Most of the buildings down around on the bridge, and Decatur, Bates, Jackson, Tufts was
Now some of those streets are
still
some of those streets are no longer here. Some
right.
are, but
Some are, right. Ferron Street's still there. That was on the other side of Bunker. Anything on the project side, everything there is old. Tufts Street's still there, Corey. But Marion's gone. Fulton's still there, Vine's still there. Decatur's gone. Jackson's gone. I think they still call it.
so the face of Charlestown dramatically changed after urban renewal came in.
Yeah, it affected the town, but in a good way. I thought, I was only a kid when we moved. I went on Park Street. I was only 2 to about 8, and when we moved to the project, and then from down there, like I said, we were in high class living.
Yeah. Now during this time, they were building the Tobin Bridge.
Right.
Now, I've heard stories of the building of the Tobin Bridge. I had an uncle who worked on the Tobin Bridge, and it was a massive undertaking for the time. But how did it change Charlestown?
Oh, it affected us a lot because all those buildings were down. Everything had to be lugged out of the town. All the wooden framed, everything that they tore down. The Navy Yard was still open. So we had a ton of traffic down that way. Anybody who lived in that area. You had all the construction trucks all along Chelsea Street putting the Tobin Bridge up. And it affected all the way to City Square in Chelsea.
Okay.
Chelsea Street. All the way down. Because we used to have a bridge going right into Chelsea. You never had the Tobin Bridge. We used to call it the Chelsea Street Bridge. It went right from City Square, trolleys with the overhead wire cable. Right across that, where we swim, now down the Earlies, straight into Chelsea, Bellingham Square.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, so it changed it quite a bit. Well, we know during the 50s there was a war that was going on, the Korean War.
Yeah.
How did that affect people in Charlestown? Coming off of World War II, the greatest generation there and the national pride. One of the things that you and I had spoken about off camera is that a lot of the people who fought in World War II stayed on and continued.
Yeah, we had a lot of servicemen, a lot of veterans that were still active in the military. And Korea broke out 6 years after World War II ended. So they were still active. So a lot of our men served in the Second World War and the Korean War. And a lot of the guys that served, the young ones that went in the Korean War, actually served in the Korea and part of the Vietnam War. So it just continued right on.
So in a 20-year span, it just seemed to
Charlestown's
continue.
men were constantly, for a small town.
And one of the things that we do know, because Billy Durrett has documented this, Charlestown's men, and now Charlestown's women as well, have always, when the call has come to serve this country, have always stepped up, and not just doing their duty, but in great numbers to fulfill their patriotic duty.
I mean, if you talk to a lot of the old timers in the town, include myself, most of the guys were all in the service, whether it was Army, Air Force, military, Marines, Navy, Coast Guard. everybody served something. Somebody in every family served.
Right.
It was a very proud town. They're still proud of their veterans. I always say that on all the things we do. I always say the town treats the veterans like gold. They should. Not because I'm a veteran, because it's what they did and
Right.
what they stand for. So
Yeah, they did it because they expected it of themselves, not that other people expected them to do it, but
Yeah.
of themselves. So the 1950s, we always hear about the great times of the 1950s. I know that I always hear my parents talk about how wonderful the 50s were. The 50s, you're going from listening to everything on a radio show to having televisions, movies, sock hops, dances, and of course rock and roll music.
yeah.
How did the 1950s, when it came into Charlestown, you being a teenager at the time,
I was.
so you didn't have the white hair then, you were,
Red curly hair.
red
at the
curly hair.
time,
So
yeah.
so what was it like to be a teenager in Charlestown during the
It's
1950s?
fantastic. I think it was a good era. Good 10 years. I think it continued into the 60s, but in the 50s, we didn't get our first television, my family, until about 1951. So if somebody on the block had a tight TV, you were all piled in their house to watch it.
Yeah.
We used to sit by a radio on Sunday nights when we come home, and we'd listen to The Shadow, The Lone Ranger, I Love Lucy, The Jack Benny Show, Amos and Andy. You just sit by your radio and laugh all night. Looking like fools. You're listening to all the...
Yeah.
But that was it, and we enjoyed it. It was a relaxful era. We weren't worried too much about the wars going on. We were worried about the Cold War. Every day in school we practiced jumping under our desk for a nuclear thing. We had civil defense training all the time. It was a scary situation, but we were having so much, you try to forget about it.
Try to forget about
We
it.
were at dances 2 or 3 times.
So
a week.
dances, I hear there were a lot of dances
Yeah.
in Charlestown. Almost every week somebody was at a dance in town.
Yeah, it was. We had the little administration building, was the mini right now at 55 Bunker on Thursday nights for 10 to 13 or 8 to 13 years old. And then when you graduated, when you turn into a teenager, you can go to St. Catherine's on Friday nights. But you had to be a teenager, you had to be in high school. Because the men that worked it asked for IDs. Believe it or not, they asked for IDs for
Really?
going to a dance. Because everybody wanted to go to the dances because, like you said, rock and roll come out in the 50s. It was a trend that just took off. Everybody was into it. I mean, you could go down to the pizza parlor and they'd have the jukebox. That's all they played. You'd go up to the coffee shops. That's all they played. And jukeboxes became the big thing back in the 50s.
Sure, I'm sure they did.
Yeah.
It was a fun and safe environment to be
It was a fun time. You get 3 records for a quarter in the jukebox.
in. So, 1955, Charlestown wins the state championship,
Oh, yeah.
and suddenly CHS Sports is on the map. Everyone knows about the Charlestown State Champions.
That was fantastic. They won the Class D. They won the Class D football state championship, first time ever. And some of those guys, believe it or not, are still alive today. I don't want to start mentioning names because if I do and I forget somebody that was one of the big stars,
Right.
I'm going to say what happened to me. So I just say, but that took off. That made Charlestown High, put us on the map. We were the only high school around, except for the Catholic high schools. We had 3 Catholic schools in Charlestown, 40s, 50s, and 60s. St. Catherine, St. Francis, St. Mary's. We had 5 or 6 public schools, and they were all full.
Right.
We had like 9 schools go on a 10 at once, and they were all full. And then it was amazing because you knew every kid from every different corner of the town. You went out of your way to know them because sports became a big thing. Like everybody knows, Bobby Orr came in and hockey took off. But football took off because of the Class D championship. In 1960, just to go back, we had 11 men in Charlestown, captains of 11 different high school teams.
And really,
From tech to trade to English.
all from Charlestown at one
If
time.
they all went to Charlestown High, you couldn't touch us in sports.
I think we'll have to do another show and get Danny Ryan in here. Danny is our state representative, but he also has a good handle on sports throughout Charlestown's history
Yeah.
because We've got some great women in sports
Yes, we
from
do.
Charlestown. Some legends who their achievements have not been matched as of yet.
Yeah,
So.
and Charlestown High in the 50s, it was diversified. We never had any problem. You know what I mean? Like they're saying that we had kids from Eastie, kids from the North End, kids from Roxbury. We had a great track team. I remember one of the great track stars that come out of Leon Waite ran track for Charlestown High. We used to go watch him at White Stadium. The hockey team became one of the premiers in the city of Boston. They won almost every year. Basketball team started winning state championships. I mean, sports just took off after 55.
That's great.
Yeah.
You know, and to this very day, I still hear people talk about the history of Charlestown sports. And even, you know, I've been around Charlestown since 1998. I believe it was 2000 or 2001, the football team won the championship yet again.
Yeah.
You know, they really came back from a big deficit. So we've heard a lot about with Mr. Kelly about how the family life was very important in the 40s. And from hearing you in the 50s, family life, and even today in Charlestown, family life is very important. Families get together all the time for a meal, or on the weekends they get together for a cookout or whatnot. Yeah. But, you know, as a teenager in the 50s, it must have been really great to have that social interaction with everyone.
It was great hanging around. I mean, the police were very good to us. I'd have to be truthful, we were very respectful for neighbors. We could hang out outside people's houses on corners. A couple of the biggest hangouts in the 50s and 60s was the park. Every corner had a little group. I mean, from the Ruins to the Kelly's Tavern to the Falcons.
Well, you told me on every corner, every square, Hayes Square, there was a group. Sullivan Square, Thompson Square.
Right.
You know,
well, we all mingled. If your guys went out early, you'd walk up the other corner and hang with them for a while till your guys come out. Guys and girls.
Yeah.
And it was just, there was no animosity. Everybody liked, because we're all playing sports together. Yeah. And the respect for the neighbors. Yeah. If somebody's mother hall fellas, you were a little sorry, Mrs. Smith.
I continually hear stories of that. People saying that other parents would call their house and say, you know, Billy was over on such and such street, and I know he's not supposed to be down that far. I just want to let you know.
Yeah.
And there was no, you know, resentment that what are you getting involved in my child's business? But thank you so much for looking out for my son.
Exactly right.
And that's great. You don't see that in other communities, and even to this very day, I still see a lot of that when I'm, you know, here at the bank or on the street. You know, I see a lot of people involved in the lives of others, which is wonderful.
Yeah, but we had a lot of things to do. We had the pool up at the park. We had all the parks. We had the sports. And the gangs, like we say, well, they were gangs. But we didn't say they were tough gangs. I mean, you could
just groups of kids.
Just groups of kids that all went to different high schools, different grammar schools, but they all mingled together.
Right. Well, let's end on a fun note. I've heard the term a lot, and it took me a long time to realize what the hippie was. The hippie in the Hollywood. Charlestown apparently had 2 movie theaters.
Yeah.
In 1 square mile, 2 movie theaters.
Right. They were both fantastic.
So during the 50s, I'm sure that, you know, everyone went in to see the matinees and the cartoons on Saturday.
Saturdays, they had the cartoons, you're right, every Saturday. And they had a premiere movie. It'd probably be Tom Mix and 2 buckets of cement. I always make a joke out of it. Tom Mix.
Tom Mix and cement. Okay.
But then they had the cartoons, Mighty Mouse, and that was the biggest thing, Mighty Mouse, every time he'd come on. But the hippie was down. We called the hippie. It was on Thompson Square.
Now that's short for the Hippodrome?
Well, I don't know what they called the hippie. I guess it was hip to go there.
Hip to go there, okay. I get it.
Then the Hollywood is on Chelsea Street, and that had to be torn down because of the urban renewal. And the Hollywood was a beautiful one. They had a chandelier in the middle of it. It had to be 1,000 lights on it. I used to live right around the corner from the Hollywood, so I used to go there a lot. But the place to go was the hippie.
The hippie.
Because we used to line up on Wood Street all the way up to the top to get into the hippie. A quarter could get you in with a bag of popcorn.
Someone told me that there were sometimes that it was so crowded on a Saturday morning that they would offer an extra bag of popcorn if you would share a seat with someone.
Double up.
Double up.
They used to say, well, in our parents' days, they say double up for a BB bat.
BB bag?
Yeah, BB bat. I don't know, it was a piece of candy. So if you doubled up, they give you a piece of candy.
A piece of candy to do it?
Yeah.
So, well, obviously, life in the 1950s was great. Life in Charlestown in the 1950s apparently was even better. So we thank you for tuning in to us today. And Billy and I will be back. We're going to be continuing on with the 1960s the next time we get together. and we'll talk about what life was like in Charlestown during the time of the Vietnam War and all the protests and how it affected family life in Charlestown. If you have any other suggestions on videos that we should do, someone had suggested that we do one specifically on women in Charlestown and another one on Bunker Hill Parade. Just get in touch with us through the Charlestown Historical Society website. Like us on Facebook, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. I'm Tom, this is Billy, and we're going. Bye.